Sadly for children, having safety in their own home doesn't always happen. There's hundreds of stories of mothers and fathers taking the lives of their own child. It seems to be a never-ending story, sadly. But there is one that took the nation by surprise. What looked to be a beautiful suburban family that anybody would dream of having flipped to a horror story in less than 20 minutes. One day, this is the awful story of the Yates family.
The new mother?
Hello.
Mother for the 5th time?
Uh-huh.
Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Right to the camera.
Bye.
You can look at this story one or two ways. It can discuss you with horror, in which it should, or see it in a small light. Once upon a time, this was a beautiful family for a short time. Strong bonds with little boys that loved each other and their new little baby sister. The story is longer than just a few minutes it took to end in a bathroom. The Yates family in reality was just like your family, but behind closed doors, there were elements unfolding. The Yates started like most, got married, started having children. People that knew them and were around them considered them strong people that were a pillar in their faith and love. But as time slipped in, Andrea lost who and what she was to her boys. It's no secret a woman making and giving birth is a hard element for any of them. But to do this 5 times in a short time is what many doctors call dangerous. The physical aspect is one thing, but to the mind, it's a whole nother element. When you talk about postpartum layering itself from the previous child's that she was still trying to get over the postpartum of, it becomes dangerous. And that's simply what started to happen to Andrea. Postpartum is a real element that mothers go through while raising a child or multiple children, working a job or staying home, but their brain is trying to reboot itself as well. But Andrea had found herself in a place called postpartum psychosis, to where she wasn't who she really was in the end. Sweet, loving, excited about the future. In the beginning, when they started having children, Rusty and Andrea were strong in their faith. They built their life on the foundation of being Christian evangelists, Bibles throughout the house, going to church, and with that, they wanted as many children as they could have, and did nothing to stop it. With the start of their first child in February of 1994, the fuse was set to explode in 7 years, and in those 7 years, Andrea would have birth 5 times to 5 beautiful children. Andrea herself was a nurse for almost 10 years before her first child was born, but giving it up to raise her children and stay home. From 1994 to 1999 was where Andrea would spend her days and nights raising children, and for most of that time span was pregnant for most of it, and trying to heal from the last birth, just in a circle of life that was never ending. But in the middle of 1999, elements started to show themselves of what damage had been done. Rusty speaks of this time where his life starts to fall apart, and one of the first moments that he speaks of, he says in 99, he came home to find Andrea curled up, shaking, and gnawing on her fingertips. Rusty calmed her down as much as he could, praying and talking with her. But the next day, she tried to harm herself with pills and nearly succeeded. She was sent to the hospital and soon prescribed more pills. Pills for pills was the cure. Rusty says it was never the same after this. He said that Andrea would beg him to just let her go, that she didn't want to be there anymore. She didn't want to breathe anymore. She would scream, hold knives to her neck, and be hospitalized a few more times. And once again, more pills, different pills, tossed at the problem. Andrea was having a nervous breakdown more times in a week that Rusty could keep track of. In the middle of 1999, a doctor would first diagnose Andrea with postpartum psychosis. But with this, Rusty is still not understanding that Andrea is a danger to not only to herself, but people around her too. It's so bad that a doctor in private would pull Rusty aside in 1999, telling him that he needs to keep an eye on her at all times. and for no reason whatsoever to have any more children and be very careful with it. That Andrea was not in a mental space to conceive any more children, and that she needed time to heal while still raising children and just trying to breathe herself. But the last time Andrea was in the hospital for trying to harm herself, she would be let go, and 7 weeks later, Rusty would impregnate her once again. From the end of 1999, going into 2001, everything seemed to be running as smooth as it could until March of 2021. When Andrea's father would pass away, Andrea herself fell apart. She stopped taking medication, stopped feeding her baby. She just sat and looked at the wall. On May 3rd of 2001, Andrea goes home from the hospital. In that same week, Andrea is home with the children, by herself. She fills the family bathtub with water right around noon, but then she walked away. She sat and thought about taking the children's lives that day, but she decided against it for whatever reason. Rusty comes home and finds the bathtub full of water, thinking Andrea was going to harm herself. The next day, she was taken to the hospital for her checkup. Andrea was in such bad shape at the doctor's office that he hospitalized her due to fear of her harming herself. She would later tell the police that day, when she filled the bathtub up, she was going to harm the children then, but didn't go through with it. But just weeks later, it would all change. This is the last picture of the family together, all of them. Just weeks, days, and hours before they're all ripped apart from each other. On June 20th of 2001, in their home in Texas, Andrea would find herself alone with the children. Rusty, who had been told by the doctor multiple times to not leave her alone with the children, would break that promise. Rusty had made contact with his mother that morning, making sure she was still to arrive around 10:30 that day to help Andrea. It's confirmed. Rusty tells everyone goodbye and leaves for work at 8:30 a.m. It's just Andrea alone with the children. She immediately goes into her plan. She makes cereal for the older boys. She sets them at the dinner table, keeping them busy. She then walks to the back bathroom, fills the tub up with 9 inches of water, of cold water. She would then go to her baby, Mary, take her to the bathtub, and hold her under. She left Mary floating in the tub. She walks back into the kitchen where the boys are, grabbing the youngest first, one by one, taking them to the bathtub, picking them up, setting them in the tub, and holding their heads under water. Andrea finally brings in her oldest son. He escapes from her, but she chases him down, dragging him back to the tub. He knew what was going to happen at just 7 years old. In the end, with just 30 minutes it took to end the lives of all of her children that took 7 years to build, they're gone. She puts them in her and Rusty's bed, side by side. Andrea at that moment is satisfied, believing she's done the right thing. She picks up the house phone and calls the police. Right after that, she would call Rusty and tell him to come home. When Andrea is arrested, she told her doctor that her children wouldn't grow up to be righteous. It's obvious that Andrea is disconnected from reality and fully not understanding the gravity of what she's done or who she was even 2 years ago. She doesn't hide anything. She calmly tells every single detail, minute by minute. There's much more that can be said about this story, but Andrea is sent to the psych ward, spending the rest of her life there, even though after 40 years, she has the possibility to be released. Rusty remarried after some time, having one more child, a son, but soon having a divorce with his new wife as well. What Andrea did is beyond horrific, but there is a case to be made that Andrea was the first victim in this story, to where she was made to become the villain. A broken mind and religious radical thoughts construed, making her a vicious killer for a moment. She should have had a break from having children, taken time for herself. It has no good happy ever after ending. It just has a moment in some reality where brothers are with each other, playing and holding with their baby sister together forever.